He walked away from his wife and newborn triplets, leaving only a wad of cash and a cold goodbye. Years later, the billionaire returns, begging for forgiveness. But can a shattered family ever be whole again? What secret is he hiding, and will his redemption come too late? The pale white light from the fluorescent lamps overhead flooded the room, illuminating every corner with ruthless clarity. The space was so immaculately clean that it felt devoid of any human presence, every surface gleaming as if rejecting the mere idea of warmth or breath. The steady beeping of machines pierced through the stillness, a cold, unyielding rhythm that marked the passage of time, even though no one was here to share it with her. The sharp scent of antiseptic hung thick in the air, stabbing at her senses, evoking the feeling of being trapped in a world where life itself was dictated by rigid, sterile rules. The stark white walls, devoid of pictures or color, created an invisible prison that Nia felt swallowing her whole. She lay there, utterly alone, as if the entire world had turned its back on her. Nia clutched the hospital sheet tightly, her fingers curling so hard that her nails dug painfully into her palms. Her breaths came in ragged, uneven gasps, each one laced with a pain that cut like knives. Beads of sweat formed on her brow, sliding down to mingle with the tears streaking her flushed face, a face worn raw by exhaustion and despair. Yet, even through her tears, Nia's eyes shone with an unyielding determination. They stared ahead, unwavering, as though clinging to the hope of something better for the children she was about to bring into the world. Beneath the hospital blanket, her body trembled, fragile against the waves of pain, but within her burned a quiet strength, an indomitable flame that refused to be extinguished. "Oh, my babies, I'll do this for you," she whispered, her trembling lips curving into a faint, resolute smile. In this cold, impersonal space, Nia was the sole beacon of life, a woman fighting not just for herself, but for the promise of a brighter future for 3 tiny lives. Marcus stood leaning against the doorframe, his tall, statuesque figure carved as if from marble. The sleek black suit he wore fit him perfectly, every stitch immaculate, exuding an air of power and wealth so pronounced it was almost suffocating. A metallic wristwatch glinted on his left wrist, catching the pale light and amplifying the stark contrast of his presence against the bleak hospital room. His pale gray eyes stared down at Nia, unyielding like a wall of stone. There was no empathy in them, no flicker of emotion in the face of the agony that racked her body and soul. He stood just a few steps away, yet it was as though he belonged to an entirely different world, a world untouched by tears, devoid of love, governed only by ruthless decisions and cold calculations. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady, devoid of warmth, like he was reciting the terms of a contract. "It's time to end this, Nia. I've made my choice, and it isn't you." The words, sharp as a blade, sliced through the silence. Marcus adjusted his tie with deliberate precision, utterly indifferent to her labored breaths and the desperate plea in her eyes. He turned away, the polished leather of his shoes clicking against the sterile floor, leaving behind a woman writhing in pain both in body and in heart. Marcus standing tall, his eyes locked on Nia, his voice deep, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion. "I can't stay. If I choose you, everything the Prescott family has built over generations will crumble. Do you understand? My family won't let anything, not even me, jeopardize this empire." His steel gray eyes flicked over Nia, their gaze turning as cold and unyielding as forged metal. "We had our moments, Nia, beautiful ones, but you have to understand, those moments can't be the reason I sacrifice everything. You want me to choose love, but love doesn't sustain an empire. Love doesn't pay salaries. It doesn't maintain power." With practiced precision, Marcus adjusted his tie, his movements mechanical and unnervingly composed, as if he had rehearsed this scene countless times. "This isn't about you.
And it isn't entirely about me either. This is the reality of the world we live in, Nia. I can't risk everything. My reputation, my position, my career, chasing some romantic dream you think exists.
A heavy silence followed. Marcus took a deep breath, stepped closer, and set an envelope on the edge of the hospital bed, his voice as sharp as a blade severing any remaining hope.
Sasabas contains enough money to ensure you and your children can live comfortably for a while. You don't need to worry about finances, at least not for the near future. But don't try to find me or contact the Prescott family. I won't be coming back. Don't make this harder than it already is.
He glanced at her one last time, his gaze unmoving, unfeeling. Then Marcus turned decisively, the sound of his polished shoes echoing against the cold hospital floor. He walked away without a backward glance, as though every shred of emotion had been buried beneath his impenetrable mask of detachment. Nia, her breath uneven, her voice trembling with anguish, yet she fought to enunciate every word.
Marcus, you promised. You said we were a family, and now, when I need you the most, you choose to leave.
She gripped the bed sheet tightly, her body shaking from the pain of labor, but she forced herself to continue.
You always said you loved me, that we'd overcome anything together, and this is how you prove your love, by abandoning me and our children.
Her tear-streaked eyes, swollen and red, pleaded with Marcus. Her voice broke, raw with heartbreak.
They're about to be born, Marcus. Your blood, your children. Don't you want to hear their first cries? Don't you want to hold them even once? How can you leave them before they've even had a chance to call you father?
She paused, gasping for air as the pain consumed her, her voice growing fainter with every word.
You say you've chosen the Prescott Empire, but is it worth it? One day when you look back, will you feel empty, Marcus? That empire, can it keep you warm? Can it love you? Can it call you dad?
Nia collapsed onto the bed, her trembling hand resting on her swollen belly as tears streamed down her face. Her voice, hoarse with pain, was barely above a whisper.
You can leave me, but they don't deserve this. They don't deserve to grow up not knowing their father's face, never hearing your voice as you tell them a bedtime story.
She raised her head, her eyes blazing with a mixture of disappointment and anger.
Don't do this, Marcus. Don't turn us into ghosts from your past.
Marcus stood motionless, his gaze icy, as if every word she spoke collided against an impenetrable wall. Finally, he shrugged, cutting her off. Marcus.
I've already told you, Nia, I don't have a choice. Emotions won't change reality.
Nia stared at him, her eyes brimming with pain, yet holding a spark of unyielding resolve. Nia.
If you walk out that door, don't expect to ever see us again. Your children won't need a father who lacks the courage to fight for them.
Marcus didn't respond. Without a word, he turned and walked away, each step cold and deliberate, leaving Nia collapsed on the bed, her labored breaths filling the empty room slowly. Marcus withdrew his hand from his jacket pocket, his movements unhurried, as though completing an ordinary task. In his hand was a thick white envelope, its edges neatly folded with almost obsessive precision. Not a flicker of emotion crossed his face as he tossed the envelope onto the bedside table. The soft thud of paper against wood echoed in the sterile room, a sound that carried the weight of finality. He said nothing, merely stood tall, adjusting his cufflinks with practiced indifference before casting one last, empty glance at Nia. His entire demeanor radiated detachment, as though he were concluding a business deal rather than abandoning the woman carrying his unborn children. Then, with no hesitation, Marcus turned on his heel. The echo of his footsteps on the cold, sterile floor resonated sharply. He walked away with a measured stride, his back straight, as if what had just transpired bore no significance in the grand scheme of his life. The door closed behind him, the sound reverberating in Nia's mind like a permanent mark of separation. She lay still, the chill of the room pressing against her skin like a vice, her eyes fixed on the envelope, a silent testament to abandonment and cruelty. Yet, as the crushing despair threatened to engulf her, a fierce contraction jolted her back to reality. Nia gasped, her hands instinctively cradling her belly, feeling the vibrant movements of the lives within her. In that moment, amidst the despair, a faint glimmer of light appeared. The first cry pierced through the heavy, oppressive silence in the room. It was not just a cry of birth, it was a declaration.
I am here and I will live.
It was Aiden's cry, strong, resounding, as if asserting his place in a world that had just rejected him. Nia exhaled sharply, tears streaming down her exhausted face, but glimmering with a spark of hope. Her body was drained, yet in that moment, her heart stirred awake, finding a newfound strength. Moments later, another cry followed. It was Lila's, a softer, gentler sound, but no less resolute. Though delicate, it blended harmoniously with her brother's, creating a sweet symphony of life. Then came Sienna, the smallest of the three, letting out her cry last. Weak at first, her voice grew steadily stronger, a quiet yet unrelenting assertion of her will to thrive. The room, just moments ago shrouded in the shadow of pain and despair, now reverberated with the sounds of life. Those fragile cries shattered the somber atmosphere, breathing vitality into Nia's weary heart. She gazed at her children for the first time, three tiny beings with rosy skin, closed eyes, and minuscule fingers that moved ever so slightly. Her tear-filled eyes, red and swollen, were no longer brimming with sorrow but overflowing with love. A love so immense it eclipsed every trace of exhaustion and despair.
My babies,
Nia whispered, her voice choked with emotion.
I've waited for you, for this moment.
With trembling hands, she reached out as each child was gently placed in her arms. Aiden, with his serious expression like a little warrior, Lila, her lips pressed tightly together, as if comforting herself, and Sienna, the smallest but radiating a fierce vitality. She felt their fragile warmth, their soft, rhythmic breaths, like the beating of hope igniting anew in her heart. Despite her body's broken state, Nia wrapped her arms tightly around her three children, as if afraid they would disappear if she loosened her grip even for a moment. She bent down and pressed a gentle kiss on each of their foreheads. That sensation, their breaths, their delicate skin against her hands rejuvenated her, infusing her with the strength to carry on no matter the trials ahead.
I'm here,
she whispered, her voice hoarse but brimming with unshakable conviction.
I won't let anyone hurt you. I will protect you, no matter the cost.
She paused, taking a deep breath, and continued, her voice clearer now, filled with determination.
I will raise you to be strong, confident. We don't need anyone's pity or salvation. As long as we have each other, we'll overcome anything.
The room gradually fell silent, save for the steady breathing of the three newborns asleep in their mother's arms. Though their cries had subsided, the echoes of life lingered like a melody that refused to fade. The dim light from the street lamp outside flickered weakly through the gap in the curtains, casting long streaks of light across the white walls. Shadows still cloaked most of the room, but those faint beams of light were like tiny flames, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, hope remains. Nia lifted her gaze, her tear-clouded eyes now shining with a steadfast resolve. She looked out into the night through the frosted glass window, where the streetlights twinkled faintly in the cold wind. Beyond lay a world that was cold, indifferent, and full of challenges, but within her, the light from her three sleeping children had become a beacon.
We'll be okay,
she murmured, her voice soft yet resolute. Her pale lips curled into a small smile, the smile of a mother who had found her reason to fight. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with hardship, but she was no longer walking it alone. The faint glow of the street lamp continued to filter in through the window, as if to remind her that darkness cannot last forever. Nia tightened her embrace around her children, feeling their warmth like a surge of new energy coursing through her exhausted body. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clearer than ever: she had to leave this place. The hospital room, now a relic of pain and loss, would soon be behind her. Nia inhaled deeply, her eyes fixed on the foggy horizon outside. The world might have turned its back on her, but she would not turn her back on her children. She had to start over, somewhere new, a place untouched by the remnants of her past, where she could build a life for the four of them. A few weeks later, the bus pulled into Portland. The city stretched before Nia with its winding streets and distant, misty mountains. She knew, deep down, that this was the beginning of the next chapter in their lives. The bus came to a halt at the final stop in Portland, carrying Nia, her 3 children, and a few battered suitcases. The icy wind whistled through the towering buildings, but Nia tightened her grip on Aiden's hand, pushed the stroller holding Lila and Sienna, and moved forward with an unshakable resolve. They arrived with nothing but her faith that they could start over, even from nothing. Their first apartment was on the ground floor of an old, worn-down building. The walls were peeling, and the wooden floors creaked under every step. The living room, kitchen, and bedroom were practically one and the same, but it was enough to give the 4 of them shelter from the rain and cold. A makeshift crib was set up next to Nia's bed, and a thin blanket was spread on the floor for Aiden. The first days were a relentless struggle. Rent, diapers, formula, each expense loomed like a crashing wave, threatening to overwhelm her. Every morning, Nia tied her hair back, pulled on a worn-out coat, and dropped her children off at a low-cost daycare in the neighborhood, a place that filled her with unease but left her with no other option. She pushed aside her worry, reminding herself that it was only temporary.
We'll be fine.
Nia told herself every night, her eyes fixed on the empty walls. She knew she couldn't let the past hold her back. Every hardship was a stepping stone to rebuilding their lives. Nia's day began before dawn, when the city was still shrouded in a hazy mist. The alarm clock buzzed, and she quickly silenced it before Sienna's cries could wake the entire household. Stifling a yawn, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, Nia moved to the kitchen to prepare a simple breakfast: a bit of bread and milk for Aiden, Lila, and Sienna. As she coaxed her children to eat, she checked the faded apron she wore, trying to smooth out the stubborn creases.
Come on, sweetheart, eat quickly, or we'll be late,
Nia said softly to Aiden, who was idly playing with a piece of bread. The boy looked up at her, his face thoughtful and solemn.
But, Mom,
Aiden said quietly, his voice tinged with sadness.
I don't like that daycare. The kids there, they keep asking why I don't have a dad.
Nia froze for a moment, her heart aching at his words. But she quickly smiled and ruffled her son's hair.
We don't need to worry about what others think, Aiden. You just need to remember that I love you and I'll always be here. Now eat up, okay? I don't want the 3 of you to be late.
After dropping her children off at daycare, Nia hurried to the small diner where she worked as a server. Her blue apron was saturated with the smell of grease from endless shifts, and her shoes clattered noisily against the floor as she moved. Her hands were constantly busy, balancing heavy trays of food, wiping down tables littered with crumbs and half-empty coffee cups.
Nia, pick up the pace. Table 5 is waiting on their drinks.
The manager barked from behind the counter.
Yes, I'm on it.
Nia called back, her voice filled with determination, even though her body screamed with fatigue. There were moments when her legs ached so badly she thought she might collapse, but the smile never left her face. She knew that every hour she worked, every dollar she earned, was another step toward giving her children a better future. When night fell, Nia returned to their small apartment, where Chloe, a kind neighbor, had been watching the kids. After tucking her 3 children into bed, she sat down at the small table in the corner of the room. The old computer on it whirred noisily as she powered it up. Stacks of business textbooks, borrowed from the library, were piled high on the desk.
I didn't ask about his father today,
Nia said to Chloe as she retrieved a few leftover cups of tea.
What did you tell him?
Chloe asked, her eyes soft with understanding.
I told him that I love them, and that's the only thing that matters. But sometimes I wonder if that's enough.
Nia replied, her voice trembling slightly. Chloe smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her friend's shoulder.
Nia, you're an extraordinary mother. Just look at everything you've done for them. Trust me, they're growing up surrounded by love, and that's more than most children ever get.
Nia remained silent, her eyes flickering with a faint glimmer of hope. After Chloe left, she turned back to her old computer. The warm glow of the desk lamp illuminated her tired, dark-circled eyes. There were nights when she slumped over the desk, her breaths heavy with exhaustion. But then, the image of Aiden, Lila, and Sienna would flood her mind, their innocent eyes looking at her, as though she was their entire world.
One step at a time, Nia. We'll get through this.
She whispered to herself, her voice soft yet resolute. Each line on the computer screen seemed to grow clearer, every lesson a stepping stone bringing her closer to her dream, building a better life for the four of them. In its earliest days, Carter Creations was nothing more than a small business run out of a corner of Nia's living room. She spent her days making phone calls and sending emails, single-handedly managing every role from brainstorming ideas and decorating to sourcing vendors. She started with small gatherings, children's birthday parties, family anniversaries held in the backyards of her clients. These events were modest but unmistakably hers, every detail, from perfectly tied ribbon bows to meticulously handwritten name cards, left people in awe. Gradually, word about Carter Creations began to spread. One client recommended another, and soon, the events grew: larger weddings in charming gardens, corporate conferences in elegant venues. Despite tight finances, Nia never let that compromise the quality of her work. She reused materials wherever possible, constantly seeking creative, low-cost solutions. Once, when a client couldn't afford fresh flowers, Nia crafted paper bouquets by hand, cutting each petal with care. On the day of the event, those handmade flowers became the centerpiece of the celebration, earning endless praise.
Dedicated, creative, always exceeding expectations.
These were the words her clients began to use to describe her. Nia didn't just create beautiful events, she delivered unforgettable experiences, making each client feel special. Chloe entered Nia's life on a stormy afternoon. The rain lashed against the windows of the community hall where Carter Creations was hosting a modest gathering. It wasn't a glamorous event, but every detail was thoughtfully curated. Nia, dressed simply in a white blouse and low-heeled shoes, moved tirelessly between tasks, arranging seating, testing the microphones, coordinating guest speakers. Her eyes betrayed her exhaustion, yet her warm smile radiated professionalism and passion, energizing everyone around her. Chloe, a white woman with blonde hair tied in a high ponytail, stood quietly watching. Her sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in everything from the carefully arranged bouquets on the tables to the graceful way Nia handled a difficult guest complaining about seating arrangements. Unable to suppress her admiration, Chloe approached, holding a glass of orange juice from the refreshments table.
You're the one behind all of this, aren't you?
Chloe asked, her tone tinged with both surprise and admiration. Nia looked up, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes.
Oh yes, but I only handle the small things,
she replied, her voice modest, almost self-effacing. Chloe raised an eyebrow, a smile forming at the corner of her lips.
Small things. You've turned a rundown hall into something beautiful, made everyone here feel at ease, and still managed to smile through it all. I don't think anyone would call that small.
Nia chuckled softly, her cheeks tinged with embarrassment.
I just do my best. There's still so much I need to learn. No, Nia,
Chloe said firmly, her tone serious.
You're not just doing well. You made me stop and take notice, and trust me, that's no easy feat. You're incredibly talented, and you need to know that.
That conversation, though brief, laid the foundation for a deep friendship. From that day forward, Chloe became one of Nia's closest allies. As a teacher with a generous heart, Chloe always knew how to lift Nia's spirits when she faltered. One time, when a potential client rejected Nia due to prejudice against her being a single black mother, Chloe didn't hesitate to speak up.
"Don't let people like that make you doubt yourself,"
Chloe said, her eyes blazing with determination.
"You're a role model, Nia. You're proof that resilience and creativity can break through any barrier. Never forget that. And most importantly, don't let anyone make you feel like you're not enough."
Chloe wasn't just an emotional anchor, she also opened doors for Nia. Knowing that Nia needed more clients, Chloe eagerly referred her to friends, colleagues, and even the parents of her students. She often volunteered to babysit Nia's 3 children during busy nights.
"I've got them tonight. Go focus on your work. And no worrying?"
Chloe would say, her tone both stern and playful.
"You're not alone, remember?"
Chloe would often remind her, patting Nia's shoulder with a warm smile. With Chloe by her side, Nia felt like she had more than a friend, she had an ally, someone who believed in her, even when she doubted herself. That belief became a quiet flame within Nia, pushing her forward step by step. Each day she grew stronger, convinced that no obstacle was insurmountable. Yet the world outside wasn't as forgiving as she hoped. As Carter Creations began to draw attention from more affluent clients, Nia discovered that not everyone was eager to embrace a single black mother like her. The scrutinizing glances, the whispered comments she overheard as she left meetings, they were like small, silent cuts, chipping away at her pride. Even so, Nia knew she couldn't afford to falter. She had faced far greater challenges, and now, for the sake of her children, she was ready to fight for her place in the world. Nia felt the prying eyes on her even before she stepped onto the cobblestone path leading to the small apartment she and her children called home. She didn't need to look directly to know those gazes bore into her, like sharp needles piercing through the fragile armor she wore every day. The wealthy neighbors, clad in impeccably pressed clothes, paused mid-conversation to glance her way.
"What does she even do to afford living here?"
A woman's haughty voice rang out, not loud but clear enough for Nia to hear.
"For someone like her, does she even belong here? She doesn't look like she does."
A man's voice replied, lower but laced with disdain. Nia clenched her jaw, willing her steps not to falter. She kept her eyes fixed ahead, refusing to give any sign that she'd heard them. But inside, a wave of anger churned. She wanted to turn around, to tell them that she worked tirelessly, day after day, to live here. That everything she had was earned through sleepless nights and relentless sacrifice. But as her gaze drifted toward the small playground in front of her, where her 3 children were laughing and chasing one another, the rebuttals died in her throat. She saw Aiden's wide smile as he ran after Lila and Sienna, their giggles filling the crisp afternoon air. The moment reminded her that she couldn't let her anger taint her children's happiness. Instead, Nia took a deep breath, forcing a smile as she walked through the front door. Every day was like this, the judgmental stares, the whispered barbs that pricked her pride. Yet she kept moving forward, kept smiling for her children, holding on to the belief that better days were ahead. But each night after the children were asleep, she sat alone in the worn chair by the window, staring into the dark expanse of sky and letting out a heavy sigh. Nia knew her confidence was being tested, day by day, hour by hour. One afternoon at the school playground, Aiden burst out of the classroom with his friends, his face glowing with joy as they raced around the yard. But his happiness was short-lived. Moments later, the cheerful laughter turned into something colder. A boy, older and taller, stood at the center of the group, pointing at Aiden with a mocking smirk.
"Hey Aiden, why don't you ever talk about your dad, or do you not have one?"
The boy taunted, his voice dripping with cruelty. Aiden froze. The giggles around him weren't loud, but they surrounded him like a cage, closing in. His small fists clenched tightly, his face flushed with anger.
"Don't say that."
Aiden shouted, his voice trembling but filled with fury. The boy only laughed louder, his words cutting deeper.
Oh, maybe your dad didn't want to stick around. Probably figured you weren't worth it.
For a moment, Aiden couldn't hold back. He lunged forward, shoving the boy hard enough to send him sprawling to the ground. The group of kids screamed in alarm as a teacher rushed over to separate them. That evening, when Nia picked Aiden up from school, he sat quietly in the back seat, a stark contrast to his usual chatter. His eyes stared out the window, his expression heavy with a sadness Nia couldn't ignore. Back at home, after Lila and Sienna had fallen asleep, Aiden suddenly turned to his mother. His eyes were red, his voice barely above a whisper.
Mom, why did Dad leave me? Did I do something wrong?
The question hit Nia like a punch to the chest. She felt as though she couldn't breathe, her heart aching as her throat tightened. She couldn't lie to him, but she also didn't have an answer that could ease his pain.
Aiden,
she began, her voice shaky.
You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't deserve to be left. Your dad, he left because he wasn't strong enough to...
Aiden looked at her, his eyes brimming with uncertainty.
But why? Why didn't he want to be here with us?
Nia pulled him into a tight embrace, as if trying to pour all her love and reassurance into him. That night, after all three children were asleep, she sat at her small desk in the corner, her eyes red from exhaustion and endless thoughts. A part of her ached from Aiden's question, while another part urged her to work harder to ensure her children's future. Her inbox overflowed with emails, a stark reminder that she didn't have the luxury of breaking down. As she scanned through the list of potential clients, her eyes landed on a familiar name, Prescott Enterprises. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the name, but she quickly pushed down the unease.
It's just a coincidence,
she whispered to herself, opening the project file for her latest big client. Yet, as she scrolled through the details, a creeping certainty began to settle in. Prescott Enterprises wasn't just a client, it was a primary sponsor for her largest upcoming project. Her heartbeat quickened, each thud carrying with it the weight of old memories threatening to resurface. Nia sat in front of her computer, the cold glow of the screen casting harsh light on her weary face. At first, it seemed like any other workday, scrolling through emails, reviewing contracts, finalizing the guest list for an upcoming major event. But when she opened the file for her newest client, her eyes froze on the bold print at the top of the first page, Prescott Enterprises. Her heart sank and a chilling sensation ran down her spine. She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. No, this couldn't be happening. They couldn't be her client. But the familiar logo in the corner of the document, a sleek design in gold and silver gray, left no room for doubt. The papers on her desk suddenly felt oppressively heavy, as though they were crushing all the progress she had fought so hard to build. Prescott Enterprises. Those two words reverberated in her mind, dragging with them a torrent of memories she had buried: Marcus's cold, unyielding stare, his cutting words, and the image of the door closing behind him, leaving her and their three children behind. Nia rose from her chair and moved toward the window. In the corner of the hotel's main conference room, where the event would soon take place, a large banner bearing the Prescott Enterprises logo hung prominently on the wall. She stood frozen before it, her hands clenched into tight fists. Pain, anger, and helplessness swirled within her, rising like a storm she couldn't control. She closed her eyes, but the memories surged forward, relentless and vivid: Marcus's icy voice, his ruthless rejection, and the soulless envelope he had left on her hospital bed that day.
Miss Carter, are you all right?
A voice broke through, snapping Nia back to reality. It was the assistant of a partner company, passing by with a clipboard in hand. Nia opened her eyes and nodded slowly.
I'm fine,
she replied, her voice low but firm, as if reassuring herself more than the other person. Returning to her desk, she sat down, staring at the contract in front of her. Part of her wanted to tear it apart, to reject it outright. But she knew doing so would cost her a critical opportunity for Carter Creations. This project could elevate her company to a whole new level, a milestone she had sacrificed so much to achieve.
Can I set aside my pride for my children's sake?
The question echoed in her mind, as weighty as the decision she faced. Nia sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the Prescott Enterprises logo as she wrestled with herself. Time seemed to stretch thin as she grappled with the choice before her. She took a deep breath, trying to listen to reason, but her heart wouldn't silence the echoes of old wounds. She told herself it was just business, yet unease crept into every corner of her thoughts. She knew continuing the partnership meant there was a very real chance of encountering Marcus. Would he remember her? Would he recognize the woman he had abandoned so many years ago? The questions lingered as the event unfolded around her. Later that day, while Nia was meticulously checking the final details on the main stage, her gaze drifted toward the crowd. And there, amidst the throng of attendees, was a figure she hadn't seen in years. Marcus Prescott, clad in a flawlessly tailored suit, stepped into the event space, his commanding presence impossible to ignore. Her breath caught as his eyes scanned the room until they locked onto hers. For the first time in years, their gazes met, and the world seemed to grind to a halt. Time, heavy with unspoken words and unresolved emotions, hung between them. Marcus stepped into the grand hall, the golden glow of the chandeliers reflecting off the elegantly set tables. He moved among the distinguished guests with his usual air of confidence, his sharp gaze and poised stride projecting a sense of invulnerability. Yet, when his eyes landed on the stage, all of that composure crumbled. Nia stood there, dressed in a deep crimson gown that exuded both elegance and power, like a queen reigning over her domain. Her hair was swept into a high bun, exposing her sharp, defined features, which radiated an unshakable confidence. She was flipping through the speaker list, her hands moving with precision, as if she commanded the entire room. A wave of emotions crashed over Marcus. Shock at the woman before him, who was no longer the fragile Nia he had left behind. Admiration for the success and strength she had clearly achieved on her own. And regret deep and all-consuming, pushing him back a step as if struck by an invisible force. Nia lifted her head, her eyes locking onto his. The room seemed to still in that moment. She didn't smile, nor did she show any sign of surprise. Her gaze was cold, steady, as if silently declaring that his presence meant nothing in the world she had built for herself. Marcus took a deep breath, his shoulders straightening as though trying to reclaim his confidence. But as he walked toward her, that composure began to waver, replaced by an unfamiliar sense of unease. He stopped a few steps away, maintaining a distance, as though afraid that coming any closer might shatter everything. His eyes, usually so composed and calculating, were now filled with turmoil. He said, her name heavy in his throat, his deep voice almost faltering.
It's really you?
Nia looked at him, her gaze as sharp as a blade. She didn't reply, didn't show any emotion. The icy detachment in her expression made Marcus feel smaller than he ever had before. He fumbled with his tie, a habitual gesture to calm himself, but it did little to help this time. Marcus hesitated, his fingers brushing the edge of his tailored suit jacket as if searching for stability.
I don't even know where to begin. It's been so many years, but seeing everything you've accomplished, all I can say is...
He paused, taking another deep breath.
I was wrong, completely wrong.
Nia remained silent, her lips pressed together, but Marcus could feel the frost in her gaze. It forced him to continue, his voice dropping to a near plea.
I know my apology means nothing to you now, but you need to know I've regretted it. Every day, every night, I've thought about you, about the children. Leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life. Walking away from 3 innocent children was unforgivable.
His voice began to tremble, the carefully built facade cracking as his emotions broke free.
I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but please, Naya, just once give me a chance to be a father to our children, to repair even a small part of the damage I caused. Naya, I'm begging you.
Marcus lowered his head, his hands hanging limply at his sides as if admitting defeat. The man who once thrived on power and reputation now stood before her, stripped of his pride, looking utterly broken. Nia remained unmoved, her composure as unyielding as steel. She tilted her head slightly, a faint, sardonic smile gracing her lips before she spoke, her voice cold and deliberate, every word cutting like ice.
You have a way with words, Marcus, but do you remember the day you turned your back on me? The day you left me alone in that cold hospital room? Do you remember what you said?
She stepped closer, her sharp gaze piercing through him, and he couldn't bring himself to meet her eyes.
You chose money. You chose the Prescott legacy over us.
She continued, her voice steady and filled with quiet fury.
You didn't just abandon me. You abandoned 3 children, your own children, on the very day they were born. And now you think a few words of regret can undo all of that?
Marcus opened his mouth, fumbling for a response, but Nia raised a hand to stop him. Her voice grew stronger, calm yet unrelenting.
We don't need you, Marcus. You have no place in the world I've built for myself and my children. I've raised them on my own, faced every challenge without you. We found peace, something I won't let you destroy. I need nothing from you. Not now, not ever.
Marcus stood frozen, his face etched with anguish as he watched her. He tried again, but her resolute glare silenced him.
Stop.
She interrupted firmly, her tone final.
If you truly want to atone, then disappear. Don't try to insert yourself into our lives again. You forfeited that right the moment you walked away.
She turned and walked away, her posture strong and unyielding. Marcus remained rooted in place, his hands hanging helplessly, his eyes filled with regret and sorrow. He realized then that Nia hadn't just moved on, she had grown into a force he could never touch. Under the glittering lights of the grand hall, Nia walked away, leaving behind the shattered pieces of a past she thought she'd never have to confront again. Each step she took was a declaration she had survived, she had triumphed, and she didn't need anyone to define her worth. She had built it herself. But even as she walked with her head held high, her mind couldn't entirely find peace. Hours later, as she sat at her desk, her eyes scanned the proposal in front of her, her thoughts swirling. It was from Maxwell Cooper, a prominent investor who had once opened doors for Carter Creations. But this time, the proposal wasn't just an expansion, it was a decision that could alter the entire trajectory of her company and her life. Taking a deep breath, Nia adjusted her blazer and stepped into the conference room where Maxwell awaited. She knew this meeting wasn't just about business, it was about proving to herself that she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Nia stepped into the conference room, the sharp click of her heels echoing against the polished wooden floor. Maxwell Cooper's modern office looked like something out of a high-end design magazine, floor to ceiling glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city, soft lighting from strategically placed LED fixtures, and a long walnut conference table that gleamed under the warm glow of the lights. Maxwell rose from his chair as she entered, a polite smile spreading across his face. He was a tall, lean man in his mid-50s, with neatly cropped silver hair and thin-framed glasses that gave him an air of intellect. His gray suit fit impeccably, complemented by a gold watch on his wrist.
Nia, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person,
Maxwell said, his voice smooth and warm, like that of an old friend. He extended his hand to her.
Thank you for arranging this meeting,
Nia replied, shaking his hand with a firm grip, her expression betraying no emotion. On the surface, she appeared calm, but inwardly she was on high alert. She knew men like Maxwell never spoke without an agenda. Every word, every gesture was part of a meticulously crafted plan. Maxwell gestured for her to sit, then slid a folder across the table toward her.
I trust you've reviewed our proposal. This is a tremendous opportunity for Carter Creations. With our funding and support, you could expand nationwide in less than 2 years.
Nia glanced briefly at the folder, but quickly returned her focus to Maxwell.
It sounds promising,
she said evenly.
But I need to understand your terms more clearly. Full control over my company is non-negotiable.
Maxwell smiled, tilting his head slightly, as if weighing her words.
I understand your concerns, Nia, but let me be candid. Any investment of this scale requires us to have a say in major decisions. This isn't just about funding. It's about strategic guidance to ensure sustainable success.
Nia leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms as her sharp gaze bore into him.
That's reasonable,
she said.
But let me be clear, a Carter Creations is my creation. I built it from nothing, and I have no intention of relinquishing control. If you or your team can't accept that, then we have nothing further to discuss.
The room grew tense. Maxwell removed his glasses slowly, wiping them with a small handkerchief.
I admire your directness,
he said, placing his glasses back on.
But Nia, you must understand that every great success requires compromise. I don't want you to think we're trying to impose. That's not what I think.
Nia replied, leaning forward slightly, her voice low but firm.
I know exactly what I've done to bring this company to where it is, and I won't trade away my autonomy for any amount of investment. If that's a problem, we can end this discussion now.
Maxwell studied her for a long moment, his eyes reflecting careful deliberation. Then he smiled, his tone softening.
I can see why Carter Creations has thrived under your leadership. Your determination and decisiveness are truly admirable. Very well, Nia. If those are your terms, we'll proceed on your terms.
Nia kept her expression steady, though she exhaled quietly in relief.
Good,
she said, her voice still resolute.
Now let's discuss how we're going to execute this project.
The meeting continued, but Nia remained vigilant. Although Maxwell had agreed to her conditions, she knew his polished words likely concealed intricate strategies. This was merely the first move in what promised to be a long and complex game. The air in the conference room was thick with tension, despite the soft, ambient lighting from the overhead fixtures. Maxwell Cooper sat across from Nia, his face maintaining its polished courtesy, though his sharp gaze betrayed an unreadable calculation. In front of Nia lay the contract, the Prescott Enterprises logo boldly emblazoned in the top corner. It was an unrelenting reminder of a past she had fought to bury. Maxwell leaned forward slightly, his smile carefully measured.
Miss Carter, I believe we're on the brink of something monumental. Prescott Enterprises offers more than just funding. They bring a global network of partners. This could elevate Carter Creations to an entirely new level. I hope you'll give this serious consideration.
Nia inhaled deeply, her eyes lingering on the contract for a moment before lifting to meet his. Her voice remained calm, though her gaze burned with quiet determination.
Mr. Cooper, I understand what you're proposing, but let me be clear. Working with Prescott Enterprises isn't an easy decision for me.
Maxwell leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced in front of him.
I understand. Prescott has a long history. There may be differing opinions, but you can rest assured that we always act in the interest of mutual success.
Nia allowed a faint smile to touch her lips, though it didn't reach her eyes.
History isn't just numbers and benefits, Mr. Cooper. Sometimes it's wounds that can't be ignored. But to be clear, I'm not partnering with them out of trust. I'm doing this for my children.
Maxwell raised an eyebrow, curiosity flickering across his face.
Are you saying this decision is about more than business?
Nia said without hesitation, her voice growing steadier.
Yes, I've raised 3 children on my own, and I won't let anyone or any organization jeopardize that. I'm entering this partnership because I need to expand my company to secure a future for them, a future I fought relentlessly to provide.
Sitting up straight, her hands rested firmly on the table.
But understand, this full control of Carter Creations remains mine. If Prescott Enterprises or anyone else, LA, thinks they can take over my company, this conversation ends here.
The room fell into silence. Maxwell watched her intently, his eyes noting every movement, every nuance. After a long pause, he smiled and nodded slowly.
I admire your resolve, Ms. Carter. It's a rare quality in this industry. Very well, we'll proceed on your terms, but I hope we can build trust as we work together. Trust has to be earned, Mr. Cooper.
Nia replied, rising to her feet to signal the end of the meeting. Before leaving, she turned back, her gaze sharp and unwavering.
And don't think for a moment I've forgotten who Prescott is.
Maxwell maintained his composed smile, but as Nia walked out of the room, the confidence she left in her wake lingered, forcing him into quiet contemplation. He removed his glasses and placed them carefully on the table, his eyes following the closed door. A mix of respect and intrigue stirred within him. Nia Carter was unlike any other partner he had encountered. As he returned his attention to the contract on the table, Maxwell gave a small nod to himself, as if acknowledging an unspoken realization. But just then, the phone on his desk rang, interrupting his thoughts. He pressed the speaker button, and a familiar voice came through.
Maxwell, how's everything progressing?
Leaning back in his chair, Maxwell's sharp gaze returned.
It's moving in the right direction, but she's not as easy to convince as you'd hoped, Marcus.
With that, the truth began to emerge. Inside Maxwell's sleek office, the project's true nature became clearer, leaving Nia on the brink of confronting the biggest secret hidden within the deal she had just agreed to. Inside Maxwell's sleek modern office, the soft glow of overhead lights reflected off the polished walnut conference table, highlighting the room's understated luxury. Stacked neatly in the center was a thick folder of documents, bearing the Prescott Enterprises logo prominently in the top corner. Maxwell, dressed in a flawlessly tailored gray suit, leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he observed Nia walking in. As Nia sat down, Maxwell offered her a polite smile before reaching for a leather case at his side. From it, he drew out a small business card and placed it atop the folder. With a measured motion, he slid both across the table toward her, as though revealing a carefully guarded secret.
I thought you should know.
Maxwell began, his tone calm yet tinged with caution.
The individual who personally approved and supports this project is Marcus Prescott.
Nia froze, her eyes locked on the card, as if it had detonated in front of her. On the ivory surface, the name Marcus Prescott was printed in sleek, gold-embossed letters, glinting under the office lights. She didn't need to pick it up to know what it represented, an unwanted reminder of a past she had fought so hard to bury. Her breathing grew heavier, but she betrayed no outward turmoil. Slowly, she opened the folder in front of her. When her gaze landed on the final page, where Marcus Prescott's signature sprawled in the familiar confident strokes, a chill ran down her spine. Memories surged like a flood, his cold words, his indifferent gaze, and the pain of being abandoned. Nia's vision darkened momentarily, her fingers gripping the edges of the folder so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Yet, she forced herself to maintain composure. Her voice, though low and hoarse, was razor sharp.
Are you telling me that Marcus Prescott is behind this project?
Maxwell nodded, his expression cautious but unwavering.
That's correct, Ms. Carter. Marcus reviewed the entire plan and personally approved it. He has full confidence in Carter Creations and wants to ensure you have the resources to execute this project to its fullest potential.
Nia raised an eyebrow, a thin, sardonic smile curling her lips without reaching her eyes.
Confidence. Are we talking about the same Marcus Prescott I know, the one who didn't hesitate to abandon everything for money and status?
Maxwell tilted his head slightly, his tone remaining neutral.
I won't deny that the past can leave difficult emotions behind, but I believe Marcus is trying to do the right thing this time. He wants to ensure your success and the success of your company. How fascinating,
Nia replied, her voice icy.
He suddenly cares about my success. Where was he when I was struggling to raise 3 children on my own? Where was he when I built Carter Creations from nothing?
Maxwell exhaled deeply, his expression flickering with uncertainty.
Miss Carter, I can't speak to Marcus's actions in the past, but I think it's important to focus on the future rather than hold on to old wounds.
Nia straightened in her chair, her gaze sharp and unrelenting.
I don't hold on to old wounds, Mr. Cooper. I overcame them. I built everything I have today on my own, without Marcus Prescott or anyone in his family. And if you think I'll sit back and let him waltz in to manipulate everything, you're mistaken.
Maxwell hesitated for a moment, seemingly searching for the right response.
You have the power to choose, Nia,
he said slowly, his voice measured.
But I hope you'll consider the long-term benefits. This is an opportunity that many companies would only dream of.
Nia lifted her head, her gaze as piercing as a blade cutting straight through Maxwell. Her voice, controlled yet seething with latent fury, echoed in the room like a deliberate blow.
I don't need help from Marcus Prescott.
Maxwell blinked, momentarily caught off guard, though his polite smile quickly returned. Yet his eyes now carried a hint of unease.
I understand that you have personal feelings about Marcus, but this is business. Those emotions don't need to interfere with a decision as significant as this. You need to look at the bigger picture.
Nia moved toward the table, her motions decisive and forceful, the tension in the room thickening with every step. She planted her hand firmly on the folder, her fingers pressing against it, as though trying to crush it. Her eyes burned, not with hope, but with simmering rage.
The past,
Nia repeated, her voice sharp enough to cut through steel.
You talk about the past as though it doesn't matter. But let me remind you of something. Maxwell Marcus Prescott isn't just a name in my memories. He's the man who abandoned me when I needed him the most. He walked away from me and my children, choosing money and power over family.
Maxwell opened his mouth to interject, but Nia raised her hand to silence him. Her voice, steely and commanding, continued, each word landing like a hammer.
And now he thinks he can come back, pulling strings behind the scenes to make me feel like I can't stand on my own. If this is how Prescott Enterprises does business, then I want no part of it. I built Carter Creations with my own 2 hands. Every step I've taken has been through blood, sweat, and tears. I don't need anyone, especially not Marcus Prescott, jeopardizing that.
Maxwell remained silent, his eyes scanning Nia as if searching for an opening in her resolve. After a pause, he exhaled slowly, his tone softening.
Nia, I understand that you've been through a lot, but you can't let personal feelings stand in the way of such a significant opportunity. This isn't just about Carter Creations. It's about the future for you and your children. Can you put those old wounds aside?
Nia let out a short, humorless laugh, her eyes narrowing as she met Maxwell's gaze.
You really don't understand me, do you?
She asked, her voice cutting through the room with razor-sharp precision. Maxwell shifted slightly in his chair, his composure momentarily faltering.
The future for me and my children doesn't depend on Marcus Prescott or anyone in his family. Everything we have today, I built myself, and I will continue to do so. If you can't offer an alternative solution, then this conversation...
Maxwell leaned forward as though preparing to make another attempt, but the icy determination in Nia's gaze froze him in place. He knew that any further argument would only escalate the situation. Without waiting for another word, Nia turned and walked away, leaving the card and folder untouched on the table. The sound of her heels echoed through the room, each step a declaration of her independence and refusal to compromise the hard-earned life she had built. Left alone in the room, Maxwell sat back in his chair, his expression briefly flickering with uncertainty. Removing his glasses, he placed them on the table, his fingers tapping lightly, as if deep in thought. In the silence, he murmured to himself, a faint, intrigued smile crossing his lips.
She's stronger than I expected, but that only makes this game more interesting.
In the soft glow of his office, Maxwell sat in quiet contemplation, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the polished walnut table. Nia's unyielding resolve had not only surprised him but forced him to reevaluate his strategy. Yet Maxwell knew one thing for certain: no matter how strong she was, every player in the game had a breaking point. His gaze flicked to the folder still lying on the table, the Prescott Enterprises logo staring back at him like an unblinking eye. Reaching for his phone, he dialed a number with deliberate precision. On the other end, a familiar deep voice answered.
Maxwell, any progress?
Maxwell smirked, leaning back in his chair.
She's not easy to persuade, Marcus. I warned you as much, but I believe she won't refuse forever. After all, she needs the resources.
There was a pause before Marcus replied, his tone tightening.
I'll handle it. I'll make things clear to her, in my own way. But first, there's something else I need to deal with.
As the call ended, Marcus stood by the towering glass windows of his Prescott Enterprises office, gazing out at the city lights glimmering against the night sky. He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for a battle he knew would be arduous. Turning sharply, he strode toward the conference room, where his father awaited him, a confrontation long overdue. The Prescott Enterprises boardroom exuded an aura of oppressive grandeur. Gilded accents lined the dark wood-paneled walls, and under the blazing crystal chandelier, a large family portrait loomed, an unspoken reminder that every member of the dynasty was bound to its immutable rules. Marcus entered with purposeful strides, his determined gaze cutting through the stillness. The sound of his shoes echoed against the marble floor, punctuating the heavy silence as he stopped before the imposing desk where Richard Prescott sat. Richard, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, remained focused on the documents before him, his deliberate indifference radiating power, as if to remind Marcus of his place in the meticulously maintained hierarchy. When Richard's voice broke the silence, it was low and cutting, like the edge of a blade.
What were you thinking, deciding to support her?
He asked without looking up, each word laced with cold disapproval.
You understand that this family cannot allow anyone, especially her, to compromise our image.
Marcus stood firm, though his hands curled into fists at his sides. He drew in a slow breath before responding, his voice steady but laced with quiet defiance.
I don't need your approval to make this decision. This is personal, and I know it's the right thing to do. Nia isn't a threat to this family, but you're trying to turn her into one.
At that, Richard looked up, his piercing gaze like twin daggers aimed directly at his son. He paused, letting the silence weigh heavily between them, ensuring his next words would land with full force.
Personal.
Richard's voice dropped, every syllable heavy with disdain.
Do you think Prescott Enterprises is a platform for you to resolve personal matters? Have you forgotten what name you carry, Marcus?
Richard rose slowly, his towering presence casting a long shadow across the boardroom table. His voice grew harsher, each word a deliberate threat.
Listen carefully, Marcus. If you don't sever all ties with her immediately, I will destroy everything she has. Her company, her reputation, everything she's fought to protect will be gone. She'll have nothing left.
The air in the room froze, heavy with unspoken tension. Marcus said nothing at first, though his clenched fists betrayed the storm brewing inside him. He knew his father wasn't one to bluff. This threat wasn't just aimed at Nia, it targeted everything she had built. everything she had sacrificed to protect their children. After a long moment, Marcus met his father's gaze, his anger no longer concealed. A spark of defiance lit his eyes, an unshakable resolve building within him. He stepped forward, the sound of his shoes deliberate and commanding against the marble floor, bringing him face to face with Richard.
"You can take everything from me,"
Marcus began, his voice low but razor-sharp.
"Strip away my wealth, my title, everything tied to the Prescott name. But you have no right to touch Nia or my children."
Richard faltered for a split second, his eyes narrowing as a flicker of surprise crossed his face. But it was fleeting, replaced by the familiar coldness and contempt.
"You'd throw it all away."
Richard spat, his voice biting with incredulity.
"Everything this family has given you. For a woman who isn't a Prescott and 3 children, you've never even known how to care for."
He sneered, his lips curling into a mocking grin.
"Are you playing games with this family, Marcus?"
Marcus didn't flinch. His eyes burned with a determination that even Richard couldn't ignore.
"I'm not playing games,"
he replied, his voice calm yet unyielding, every word like a solemn vow.
"If protecting Nia and my children means giving up everything you just mentioned, then so be it. I made the mistake of leaving her once, and I won't make it again."
Richard's jaw tightened, his eyes searching Marcus's face for any sign of weakness. But there was none, only an immovable resolve. Frustration flashed in Richard's expression, and he slammed a hand onto the table, the sound reverberating through the room.
"Do you even realize what you're saying, Marcus? Prescott Enterprises isn't just wealth. It's a legacy, a lifeline for this family. If you walk away, you're not just betraying me, but generations of our ancestors who built everything you take for granted."
Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh, his expression hardened.
"I'm not betraying anyone,"
he said evenly.
"I'm doing what you never could, protecting the people I care about. You can call it betrayal, but I call it walking my own path. And if you think Prescott Enterprises gives you the right to destroy everything Nia has built, you're wrong. I won't let that happen."
Richard glared at Marcus, disbelief and fury etched across his face. The room felt as though it might explode from the tension, but Marcus stood his ground, unyielding. Finally, Richard sank back into his chair, though his gaze never softened. His voice, tinged with anger and resignation, broke the silence.
"You're tearing apart everything this family has worked for, Marcus. If you choose this path, don't expect to come back."
Marcus nodded, his shoulders square, his expression resolute.
"I won't need to,"
he replied, his tone calm but heavy with finality.
"Because this is my path now, and I won't let anyone stop me."
Marcus left the boardroom, his breath steady but his mind racing. For the first time in his life, he had stood up to his father, and he had no regrets. But as the faint evening light filtered through the quiet halls of Prescott Enterprises, a foreboding sense of unease crept into his thoughts. Miles away, chaos erupted. Red flames and thick black smoke consumed the skyline as Carter Creations, Nia's pride and the product of years of struggle, was engulfed in a raging fire. Sirens blared, mingling with frantic shouts as firefighters battled the inferno. Back at Prescott Enterprises, Marcus's phone buzzed urgently. As the voice on the other end delivered the news, he froze, his eyes widening in shock. His grip on the phone tightened, the words echoing like a thunderclap.
"Nia's office is on fire. The fire department says it wasn't an accident."
Without hesitation, Marcus stormed out of the building, determination etched into every step. He had sworn never to lose Nia or their children again, and he wasn't about to break that promise now. The night seemed to tear apart under the crimson blaze engulfing the Carter Creations building. From shattered windows, thick black smoke poured into the air, curling and twisting as it climbed into the sky, forming an oppressive cloud that muted even the pale glow of the moon. The wail of fire truck sirens echoed through the streets, mingling with the shouts of onlookers gathered at a safe distance. Firefighters worked tirelessly, directing powerful streams of water at the raging inferno, but it was as if the flames were a living beast, roaring and consuming everything in its path. The once proud Carter Creations sign, hanging precariously from the facade, succumbed to the fire's relentless assault. One by one, the letters burned black and collapsed to the ground with a series of ominous crashes, each sound resonating like the final notes of a tragedy. When Nia arrived on the scene, her breath caught in her throat, strangled by the sheer horror before her. Her wide eyes reflected the flickering flames, filled with disbelief and raw despair. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she sank to the cold pavement, her body trembling as though the weight of the moment was too much to bear. Tears streaked down her face as she stared at the building, the home of her dreams, her sweat, her sacrifices now reduced to a fiery grave.
No, this can't be happening.
Nia whispered hoarsely, her voice breaking under the strain of devastation. Her trembling hands clutched at the hem of her coat, desperate for something, anything, to ground her in the nightmare that was unraveling before her eyes. Chloe appeared beside her, panting as she pushed through the crowd to reach her friend. Her eyes were wide with worry as she knelt next to Nia, gripping her shoulders in an attempt to pull her up from the unforgiving ground. Chloe's voice was urgent yet gentle, an anchor in the chaos.
Nia, we'll figure this out. Don't let this break you. You're stronger than this. I know you are.
Chloe's hands tightened on Nia's shoulders, willing her to hold on, to find the strength buried beneath the devastation. But Nia didn't respond. Her gaze remained fixed on the flames, on the smoke and fire consuming every memory, every dream she had poured into that building. Somewhere deep within her, a cold suspicion began to take root, slithering through her like an icy wind cutting to her core. She shook her head slowly, her voice a faint, heavy murmur, as if speaking only to herself.
They never stop, do they?
Chloe frowned, alarm and confusion flashing across her face. She leaned closer to Nia, searching her friend's tear-streaked expression for answers.
What do you mean? Who are they, Nia?
Nia didn't reply immediately. Instead, she clenched her hands into tight fists, her nails digging into her palms as she tried to contain the storm of fury building within her. Her shoulders trembled slightly, but when she finally spoke, her voice was a low growl, each word cutting like a blade.
The Prescott family.
Her eyes burned with anger as she turned to Chloe.
They never wanted me to succeed. They never have. From the moment I left Marcus, they've tried to control me, to crush me. And when they couldn't, this...
She gestured toward the burning building, her voice breaking under the weight of her rage.
This is what they chose. They always find a way to destroy everything I've worked for.
Chloe's eyes widened, the tension in Nia's words sending a chill through her.
You think they did this? Are you saying this fire wasn't an accident?
Nia closed her eyes, and the memories came rushing back like an unrelenting tide. She saw Richard Prescott's cold, calculating stare as he delivered his chilling warnings. She heard his sharp words, the veiled threats that had followed her long after she'd left Marcus. When she opened her eyes, they were filled with an icy determination.
This wasn't an accident, Chloe. They know I don't belong in their world, but they won't let me leave it in peace. This is how they remind me that I'm nothing compared to their power.
Chloe placed a hand on Nia's shoulder, her eyes filled with compassion and concern.
Nia, I understand how you feel, but we don't know anything for sure yet. Don't let anger cloud your judgment. We need proof. And if it was them, you're not alone. You have me. And you have everyone who believes in you. We'll get through this together.
Nia turned to Chloe, her tears shimmering in the light of the fire. But the vulnerability lasted only a moment. She nodded, her voice regaining its strength and conviction.
I've rebuilt it once from the ground up, and I'll do it again if I have to. But this time, they won't get another chance to ruin my life or my children's lives.
She turned back to face the burning building, the flames still raging against the darkened sky. In her eyes, the tears mingled with the fiery glow, but her resolve was unshaken. The fire continued to devour everything within the structure, but in Nia's heart, another fire burned, one of defiance, determination, and an unyielding will that no amount of destruction could extinguish. In the smoky haze of the night, Nia's steadfast gaze burned like an unbreakable vow she would not let anyone extinguish her future or that of her children. But as the fire was gradually brought under control, leaving the Carter creations building a smoldering heap of ash, one question gnawed at her relentlessly: who had orchestrated this tragedy? Elsewhere, in the expansive office of Prescott Enterprises, Marcus stormed through the doors like a thunderclap. His eyes blazed with unrestrained fury as he slammed a newspaper onto Richard Prescott's desk, its front page image of the burning Carter creations building a glaring indictment.
"Father,"
Marcus growled, his voice low but charged with rage, resonating like a damning verdict.
"don't tell me you know nothing about this."
Richard Prescott's office exuded the same oppressive grandeur as the man himself. The dark wood-paneled walls gleamed under the light of an elaborate crystal chandelier, and the towering bookshelves, crammed with volumes and documents, were an ever-present reminder of the family's iron grip on power. But tonight, the carefully maintained silence of the room was shattered by the heavy, angry footsteps of Marcus. The wooden doors burst open, slamming against the walls with a force that sent the framed portraits trembling on their hooks. The atmosphere shifted instantly, as if a storm had torn through the previously controlled environment. Marcus strode in, his face shadowed with fury, his eyes alight with a fiery intensity that seemed to scorch everything in his path. In his hand, he held the newspaper, the image of the Carter creations building engulfed in flames, practically screaming accusations. He hurled the paper onto his father's desk, scattering other neatly arranged documents.
"What did you do?"
Marcus demanded, his voice cold and razor-sharp. Every word landed heavily, carrying the weight of an accusation impossible to ignore. Richard, dressed impeccably in a bespoke gray suit, remained seated, unhurried and calm. He turned a page in the document before him with maddening nonchalance, as though oblivious to his son's seething anger. When he finally looked up, his expression was devoid of remorse. A faint, mocking smile tugged at the corners of his lips.
"What are you talking about, Marcus?"
Richard asked, his tone light but laced with thinly veiled derision. Marcus slammed his hands onto the desk, the sound reverberating through the room. His blazing eyes never left his father's calm, detached face.
"Don't play dumb with me."
He spat, his voice trembling with barely contained anger.
"Carter Creations, Nia's office, was burned to the ground. The entire city knows it, and I don't need to think hard to figure out who's behind this."
Richard leaned back in his chair, a faint glint of amusement in his cold eyes as he studied his son's outburst, his hands folded neatly in his lap, exuding an air of calculated control.
"I did what was necessary to protect this family,"
Richard said evenly, his tone maddeningly calm, as though discussing the weather.
"Don't you see, Marcus, she's a liability. She weakens the Prescott name. She doesn't belong in our world, and she certainly has no place in the legacy we've spent generations building."
Richard leaned forward slightly, his gaze turning steely and piercing.
"Did you really think I'd let a woman like her sully the Prescott name?"
He continued, his voice sharpening with every word.
"If I have to choose between safeguarding this family's legacy and allowing her to tear it apart, my decision is crystal clear."
Marcus laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and sharp, a release of the frustration and disgust that had been simmering within him for years. He shook his head, his glare never wavering from Richard's impassive face.
"Protecting the family."
Marcus repeated, his voice low and cutting.
You think destroying Nia's work, threatening the woman I love and the mother of my children, is protecting the family? No, Father, you're not protecting anyone except your own pathetic legacy. And that legacy is nothing more than a mask for your selfish ambition.
Richard's expression darkened, though his features remained composed. A flicker of anger danced in his eyes as he leaned forward, his voice dropping to an icy whisper.
You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Marcus,
he said, his words dripping with condescension.
One day, you'll understand that maintaining power requires making hard decisions. This isn't personal. This is business. And the Prescott family does not bend to fleeting emotions or momentary attachments. No.
Marcus replied, his voice suddenly calm, the kind of calm that carried the gravity of an irreversible decision.
This isn't business and it isn't reason. It's deeply personal. And if being your son means I have to abandon Nia and my children, then this family is no longer something I can be a part of.
Richard straightened, his broad shoulders casting a shadow over the desk. His tone grew sharper, his anger barely concealed beneath a veneer of control.
You dare defy me, Marcus?
He hissed, his words crackling with menace.
Do you even realize what you're throwing away? Wealth, power, influence, everything that made you who you are today. Do you think you can survive out there without the Prescott name? I dare.
Marcus interrupted, his voice steady and unyielding. He took a deep breath, as if sealing his resolve.
I don't need the Prescott name to stand tall. I don't need your power, your money, or any of the chains you use to control everyone around you. All I need is Nia and my children. They are my real family, not you, not this legacy.
With deliberate movements, Marcus removed the Prescott family ring from his finger. The symbol of power and prestige he had once worn with pride now felt like a shackle. He placed it on the desk before his father, the sound of metal meeting wood echoing like a final goodbye. Richard's gaze flicked to the ring, a flicker of pain flashing through his eyes before it was swiftly replaced by cold fury.
You're destroying everything our ancestors built, Marcus.
Richard said, his voice taut with restrained rage.
You're turning your back on this family, on its history. Once you walk out that door, don't expect to return.
Marcus met his father's glare head on, his own gaze unwavering.
I won't need to?
He said, his voice firm and steady.
Because I'm not walking in your shadow anymore. I'm writing my own story now, and for the first time, I know exactly where I'm going.
With that, Marcus turned on his heel, his every step a defiant echo in the cavernous room. The heavy doors closed behind him, leaving Richard Prescott alone in the suffocating silence. The family ring lay abandoned on the desk, gleaming coldly under the chandelier's light, a stark symbol of a bond irreparably severed. Marcus emerged into the night, his breath mingling with the chill of the air. His heart was heavy with the weight of his decision, but for the first time he felt truly free. He had forsaken everything that once defined him: power, prestige, and the Prescott name, but none of it mattered anymore. He had chosen his real family, and with that choice he walked forward, unflinching, toward the light.
As Marcus walked through the cold night, his resolve shone like a faint but unwavering light, guiding him toward a different future. Meanwhile, in another corner of the city, in the small room Nia called home, silence blanketed everything. She sat by the table, the soft glow of a dim desk lamp casting warm light across her contemplative face. Though the modest room was simple, it was the only place that gave her a semblance of safety amidst life's relentless storms. Yet tonight, the once comforting space felt heavier than ever. The room was shrouded in quiet, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of a clock and the soft breaths of her 3 sleeping children. Aiden lay turned toward the wall, clutching his favorite pillow tightly. Lila and Sienna were nestled close together, their small bodies wrapped snugly in blankets, wisps of hair falling across their innocent faces. Their breaths were soft and even like a gentle lullaby that filled the air. But to Nia, each inhale and exhale was like a knife twisting in her chest, a reminder of the responsibility she felt she had failed to uphold. Sitting in the worn chair beside their bed, Nia's hands hung limply over her knees. Her gaze never left her children, as if searching their sleeping faces for the peace she couldn't seem to find. Tears fell silently, tracing cold paths down her cheeks before landing on her trembling hands.
I couldn't protect us,
she whispered, her voice so faint it barely escaped her lips, yet it carried a grief that felt insurmountable.
It was everything I built, everything I worked for. It's all gone, I'm sorry. I failed.
She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to stifle the sobs rising from her chest. But the pain was too much an unrelenting wave that washed away any semblance of composure she had left. She bent forward, clutching the edge of the bedsheet so tightly her knuckles turned white. Memories crashed over her like a relentless tide, each one sharper than the last. The vivid image of Carter Creations engulfed in flames, the black smoke spiraling upward, devouring every ounce of her hard work. The wailing sirens and panicked shouts seemed to echo in her mind, refusing to fade.
Where did I go wrong?
She murmured, her voice catching as the question tumbled out.
What did I do to deserve this? I tried so hard, and it was all for nothing.
Her gaze shifted back to her children, her eyes red and glistening with a painful mix of guilt and love. Aiden, Lila, and Sienna, they had endured so much, seen more hardship than any child ever should. She felt as though she had dragged them down into her abyss.
I'm so sorry,
she whispered again, her voice cracking.
You deserve so much more, so much better than me.
She buried her face in her hands, tears falling freely now. For a moment she felt as if she were drowning in the darkness, unable to find a way out. This small room, once their sanctuary, now felt like a suffocating cage, trapping her with her pain and powerlessness. But then, as if by instinct, her eyes returned to her children. Their innocent, sleeping faces stirred something deep within her, not more pain, but love. A fierce, unyielding love that burned hotter than her despair.
I can't give up,
she thought, her voice trembling but growing steadier with each repetition.
Not for me, but for them.
She drew in a shaky breath, wiping away her tears even as they continued to fall. Somewhere in the overwhelming darkness, a flicker of hope began to spark. A soft knock at the door broke the silence, pulling Nia from her spiraling thoughts. She quickly wiped her cheeks, trying to compose herself even as her heart felt raw and hollow.
Come in,
she said, her voice hoarse, barely audible. The door creaked open, and Chloe stepped inside, her face etched with concern and empathy. Her blonde hair was tied back neatly, and her coat still carried the chill of the evening air. Chloe didn't speak immediately. Instead, she moved closer, sitting beside Nia with quiet purpose, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of her friend's exhausted, tear-streaked face.
Nia Indy,
Chloe said softly, her voice warm but resolute. She reached out, gently taking Nia's trembling hand in her own. Her touch was steady, radiating a quiet strength.
You can't keep doing this to yourself. I know this is more than anyone should have to bear, and I know how much you're hurting, but listen to me. You're stronger than this. Don't let them take the most important thing you have left, your hope.
Nia hung her head, her voice breaking as she answered.
But I don't know what to do anymore, Chloe. I've lost everything. Carter Creations wasn't just a company. It was my dream. It was the only way I knew how to give my children a better life.
She paused, struggling to steady her breath.
And now it's just ashes. How am I supposed to rebuild from this?
Chloe's grip on Nia's hand tightened, her gaze unwavering.
Nia, listen to me,
she said firmly, her voice carrying the weight of conviction.
You didn't start from nothing just to give up now. You fought through too much to stop here. Your children need you, and so does the world. You're not just a mother or the founder of Carter Creations. You're proof that anyone can rise above their circumstances, no matter how hopeless it seems.
Nia looked up at Chloe, doubt clouding her tearful eyes, though a faint glimmer of hope began to stir.
What if I fail again?
She asked, her voice shaking.
What if everything I touch just falls apart? I don't know if I can handle that.
Chloe gently lifted Nia's chin, forcing her to meet her gaze.
Remember why you started, Nia. You fought not because you had no other choice, but because you believed life could be better. And I know that deep down, you still have that strength. You've survived things that would have broken anyone else. And now, if you don't stand up, no one else can do it for you.
Nia exhaled a shaky sigh, but for the first time it felt lighter.
I can't do this alone, Chloe,
she admitted, her voice trembling.
I don't even know where to begin. You're not alone, Nia.
Chloe smiled, her eyes warm with reassurance.
I'm here. I'll always be here. We'll rebuild this together stronger than ever. But first, you have to stand up for yourself, for your children, and for everyone who believes in you.
Nia looked into Chloe's eyes, her own still red and swollen, but now tinged with a fragile determination. She nodded slowly, letting Chloe's words take root in her heart.
You're right,
she whispered, her voice still trembling but steadier.
I can't give up, not now, not ever.
Chloe smiled wider, a small beacon of light in the darkness. She patted Nia's shoulder gently.
That's the Nia I know, remember? You're not alone. We'll get through this just like always.
In that small room, surrounded by the gentle breaths of her sleeping children, a new fire began to kindle in Nia's heart. This time it wasn't a fire of destruction or despair, but one of hope and resolve stronger than ever before. In the small but warm room, Nia stood before her desk, where a stack of neatly arranged documents awaited her. Under the soft golden glow of the desk lamp, the bold print on the lawsuit form stood out, each word screaming aloud the truths she had suppressed for far too long. Nia took a deep, steadying breath, her hand resting on the paper as if to ground herself. She felt the tension in every vein, every muscle, as though her entire body was bracing for a battle she knew would be anything but fair. In the mirror across the room, her reflection stared back not the exhausted, defeated woman she had been after the fire, but a warrior, resolute and unyielding.
I've been silent for too long,
she murmured, her lips pressing into a firm line, her gaze steely with determination.
It's time they face the consequences, not just for what they did to me, but for everyone they've ever wronged.
She walked to a small shelf and picked up the folder Chloe had helped her prepare. Evidence, witness statements, and her own story, all meticulously compiled. Her hand trembled slightly as she gripped the folder, but her eyes didn't waver. Chloe entered the room, a steaming cup of coffee in hand.
Are you sure about this, Nia?
Chloe asked, her voice tinged with concern but also admiration. Nia turned to face her, her expression unwavering.
I'm sure,
she said, her voice low yet unshakable.
They think their power and wealth can silence every voice, but they're wrong. I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing it for my children. They need to know their mother never bowed to injustice.
Chloe offered a small, supportive smile, setting the coffee down on the desk.
I'm here for you always,
she said, her eyes glowing with trust and belief.
And I know you can do this. Prescott Enterprises may be powerful, but they've never faced someone like Nia.
Nia lifted the folder, feeling its weight not just the physical heft of paper, but the far heavier burden of courage and conviction. She stepped toward the door, the light from outside spilling in and illuminating her face, making her eyes shine brighter than ever. She didn't know what the outcome would be, but she knew one thing for certain: this was the path she had to take for herself, for her children, and for everyone who had ever been crushed beneath the weight of an unshakable force. And this time, she would not back down. In the bright light of the following morning, Nia stepped out of her small home, clutching the stack of documents tightly in her hands. Each step she took on the path ahead was fueled by determination, yet she knew this battle couldn't be fought alone. At that very moment, in another part of the city, Marcus Prescott was preparing for a pivotal move of his own. With his phone in hand, his eyes lingered on the name displayed on the screen: Nia Carter. He knew that if he wanted to atone for his past mistakes and protect her and their children, he would have to stand by her side in this fight, no matter the cost. When Marcus's car pulled up in front of Nia's lawyer's office, their eyes met through the tinted window. Nia's expression flickered with surprise and suspicion, but she didn't walk away. She stood her ground, and Marcus approached, his face a mix of resolve and sincerity.
"We need to talk,"
he said, his deep voice steady, carrying the weight of a declaration they would face the towering forces against them together. Nia hesitated briefly, then nodded. She understood that to dismantle an empire, she needed every ounce of support she could muster, even from Marcus. And so began an unlikely alliance, brimming with potential. In a small conference room at Nia's lawyer's office, the glow of overhead lights illuminated stacks of documents, sprawling diagrams on the table, and red pens dotting a whiteboard. The space was compact, but charged with the intensity of two people preparing to challenge a giant. Nia sat at one end of the table, her hands deftly flipping through notes, her sharp gaze like a blade cutting through the clutter. At the other end, Marcus stood tall, a laser pointer in hand, directing attention to a complex diagram of Prescott Enterprises, marked with red circles.
"This is where it starts,"
Marcus said, his voice low and deliberate, his eyes scanning the documents as though he were retracing the steps of his own past.
"These files lead us to the shell transactions they've buried in satellite projects. This is the first thread. If we can pull it, we'll have enough evidence to expose years of financial manipulation."
Nia leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her gaze locked on Marcus.
"And how do I know you're not leading me into another trap?"
she asked. Her words were pointed, but her tone lacked the harshness it once carried. Instead, there was caution, the sound of someone testing the waters of trust they'd once lost. Marcus set the pointer down on the table, drawing a deep breath. His eyes softened, revealing a rare sincerity.
"I understand why you doubt me,"
he said, his voice quieter but no less firm.
"I don't blame you, but Nia, I have nothing left to hide. I gave up everything to be here to help you. I'm not asking you to trust me overnight, but I promise you you're in control. I'll provide the information, but every decision will be yours."
Nia stayed silent, her eyes scrutinizing every inch of his face, as though searching for the slightest trace of deceit. But his gaze didn't waver, and there was no hint of avoidance.
"Fine,"
she said at last, her voice measured but resolute.
"I'll trust you, for now."
The two began working, the silence punctuated only by the rustling of papers and the clatter of keyboard keys. Marcus brought forward internal documents, old emails and altered contracts, each piece a fragment of the larger picture exposing how Prescott Enterprises had manipulated the truth.
"This is one of the key contracts,"
Marcus said, sliding a file across the table to Nia.
"It looks legitimate, but if you scrutinize this appendix, you'll see it doesn't match the financial report."
Nia skimmed the pages quickly, her eyes narrowing as she caught the discrepancy.
"Did they really think no one would notice this?"
she muttered, her lips pressing together in focused frustration. Marcus allowed himself a small, fleeting smile.
"They thought their power would silence anyone who tried, but they didn't count on you."
Each night, after Nia's children had fallen asleep, she and Marcus sat across from each other in the soft glow of her desk lamp. Nia's fingers flew across her keyboard, her eyes fixed on the bluish glow of the screen as she logged evidence. Marcus sat beside her, guiding her step by step, explaining the subtle tactics his family's empire had used to evade accountability. One evening, after a long stretch of silence, Marcus spoke, his voice low and tinged with admiration.
"You're better at this than anyone I've ever worked with."
Nia glanced up, caught off guard by his compliment.
"I'm not doing this for praise, Marcus,"
she said firmly.
"I'm doing this for my children, for people like me, people who've been silenced by greed and power."
Marcus nodded, his expression solemn.
"And that's exactly why I believe in you,"
he said, his voice steady. Over time, the tension between them ebbed, replaced by a collaboration built on mutual purpose. Nia came to see that Marcus was no longer the selfish, cold man she once knew. He worked tirelessly, providing critical information and leaving every decision in her hands. On their final night of preparation, as they completed the last of the documents, Nia set down her pen, a wave of exhaustion and accomplishment washing over her. She looked at Marcus, her eyes no longer clouded with doubt, but instead filled with acknowledgement.
"Thank you,"
she said softly, her tone imbued with genuine gratitude. Marcus offered a faint smile, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in days.
"You don't need to thank me. This is what I owe you and our children."
In the quiet of that small room, under the dim glow of the lamp, two determined faces reflected a shared resolve. From adversaries to allies, they were now partners in a fight far greater than either had imagined, a fight for truth, justice, and the future of those they loved. In the days that followed, the collaboration between Nia and Marcus deepened. Each night, the dim glow of a desk lamp illuminated the small room where they pored over documents, preparing for the battle ahead. Their synergy grew not only in their shared dedication to the work, but also in their mutual belief in justice. Yet, despite the progress they made, Nia couldn't shake the weight in her heart. Deep down, she knew that in a fight against a giant like Prescott Enterprises, trust was a luxury she could scarcely afford. The day of the trial arrived, and the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Nia sat composed at the plaintiff's table, her gaze unwavering as it fixed forward. She believed she had prepared for every possible curveball, but her faith was shattered in a single, devastating moment. When the opposing counsel presented unexpected evidence, a set of internal documents from Carter Creations, the courtroom fell silent. Nia furrowed her brow as unease twisted in her gut. And when the source of the leaked information was revealed, Angela, a former colleague she had trusted, the shock sent a ripple of disbelief through the room. The betrayal hit like a punch to the chest, leaving Nia momentarily breathless. She never imagined her most difficult battle would begin with treachery from someone who once stood beside her. The weight in the courtroom was almost tangible, as though everyone present held their breath, waiting for the next move. Nia sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands gripping a pen so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her eyes were fixed on the large screen at the front of the room, where documents from Carter Creations were displayed. Those familiar pages, details, and figures she had painstakingly scrutinized over months were now being used against her.
"These documents,"
the opposing counsel declared, his voice laced with smug confidence,
"prove that the plaintiff's company engaged in financial misreporting. This, Your Honor, undermines the entirety of Ms. Carter's claims."
Nia stared in disbelief as each page flashed on the screen. Questions roared in her mind. How had they obtained these documents? She had never allowed them out of her sight. More importantly, why had they been altered?
"Objection!"
Nia's lawyer stood abruptly, his voice firm and authoritative.
"These documents are inadmissible. They were obtained without the plaintiff's consent and have clearly been manipulated to distort the truth."
The judge turned a sharp eye to the opposing counsel.
"Can you explain the origin of these documents?"
she asked, her tone calm but cutting. The opposing counsel stepped forward, a sly smile curling at the corners of his mouth.
"These documents,"
he began slowly, his voice dripping with calculated malice,
"were provided by a former colleague of the plaintiff, someone directly involved in the company's operations."
The courtroom fell deathly silent. Nia felt the blood drain from her face. A former colleague? Images of familiar faces raced through her mind, but none of them seemed capable of such a betrayal. Then, from the back of the courtroom, Angela, her former assistant and confidante, slowly rose to her feet. Her eyes refused to meet Nia's as she kept her head bowed, seemingly trying to avoid the weight of the stares now directed at her.
"Angela,"
Nia whispered, her voice barely audible amidst the suffocating silence. Disbelief and heartbreak filled her eyes as she watched the woman she had once trusted implicitly step forward. Angela began, her voice trembling.
I did what I had to do for myself. They promised me a generous reward and assured me I wouldn't face any repercussions. I didn't have another choice."
No other choice. Those words sliced through Nia's heart like a blade. She shot to her feet, her voice shaking with a mix of fury and sorrow.
"No other choice?"
she repeated, her gaze piercing through Angela.
"I treated you like family, Angela. I trusted you more than anyone, and this is how you repay me."
Angela kept her head lowered, her hands wringing nervously.
"I didn't want to do this,"
she murmured, but her feeble justification only stoked Nia's anger. Nia's lawyer gently placed a hand on her shoulder.
"Nia, stay calm,"
he urged quietly.
"This isn't the time to react emotionally."
Nia drew a deep breath, forcing herself to sit back down, though her eyes never left Angela. She felt as though the ground beneath her was crumbling, but she knew now wasn't the moment to falter.
"We request additional time to review these documents,"
Nia's lawyer said firmly to the judge. The judge nodded.
"Court will recess for 15 minutes to allow both parties to prepare further."
As they stepped out of the courtroom, Nia felt as though she were walking a tightrope suspended over an abyss. She turned to Marcus, who had remained steadfastly by her side, a pillar of silent support.
"They think they can destroy me with this,"
she said, her voice steady despite the fire in her eyes.
"But they're wrong."
Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his gaze warm but resolute.
"You're not alone, Nia. They made a mistake thinking you would crumble. We'll fight this together."
Nia nodded, her eyes now gleaming with determination. Though her heart ached from Angela's betrayal, she knew she couldn't stop. Ahead of her, the courtroom doors loomed, a gateway to the battle she was ready to face. In the cramped and stifling temporary office, the ticking of the wall clock echoed like the hurried beats of time slipping away. The hands moved relentlessly, and the number on Marcus's phone screen was glaringly clear 24 hours. That was all the time they had to uncover the crucial piece of evidence, one that could salvage Nia's entire case before the trial resumed. Marcus stood at the desk, his gaze intense but focused. Papers lay scattered across the surface, alongside a laptop screen displaying old emails and the tangled web of Prescott Enterprises' financial charts. He clenched a pen tightly in his hand before letting it drop, his expression hardening with determination. Beside him, Nia sat quietly in her chair, her hands balled into fists. She watched Marcus, unease washing over her as the urgency in the air grew heavier.
"Marcus, if we don't find this evidence,"
she began, her voice quiet but trembling with worry. Marcus turned to her, his eyes burning with resolve. He stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder.
"Nia, I know,"
he said, his voice low and firm.
"But we can't afford to think about failure. I won't let you fail. Trust me."
The desk lamp cast a sharp light across Marcus's face, accentuating the gravity in his gaze. This wasn't just responsibility, this was penance. It was a vow to protect Nia and her children after all the harm he had caused. He sat beside her, pulling the laptop toward him.
"We need to focus on the satellite projects,"
he said, pointing at a graph on the screen.
"This is where my father hid most of the shady transactions. If we can find a link between Prescott Enterprises' records and what they presented in court today, we'll—"
Nia nodded, feeling a flicker of confidence reignite within her, fueled by Marcus's unwavering determination. She steadied herself and turned back to the screen, her focus sharpening as they combed through each detail together. Outside, night had fallen, and the streetlights cast their glow through the window, a silent reminder that time would not wait. In the stillness, the clock continued to count the seconds, a relentless reminder of their dwindling hours. Marcus stood and looked out into the darkened city beyond the glass, his eyes glinting with a fierce resolve. A cool breeze seeped through a crack in the window, carrying with it a chill, but within him, a fire of purpose burned brightly. He turned to Nia, who was hunched over the table, her keen eyes scanning the remaining documents.
"I have to go,"
Marcus said, his voice steady and resolute. Nia lifted her head, her eyes reflecting a mixture of worry and trust.
"Are you sure? They won't make it easy for you to get what we need."
Marcus nodded, his gaze softening as it rested on her.
"I'm sure. This is the only way. Trust me, Nia."
She watched as Marcus left the room, his footsteps echoing like a declaration that there would be no turning back. Outside, the city was blanketed in darkness, but for Marcus, it was merely a shroud concealing the place where he would confront the deepest shadows of his past. Without hesitation, he stepped into the night, heading toward the towering symbol of power and legacy that had defined his life, Prescott Tower. Darkness shrouded Prescott Tower, the iconic building of the Marcus family, now evoking a feeling both hauntingly familiar and terrifying. The glow of security floodlights swept across the front courtyard, casting harsh white streaks over the cold marble ground. Marcus crouched behind a wall, straining to hear the footsteps of the patrolling guards. His heart pounded violently in his chest, but his eyes burned with resolve.
"Stay calm,"
he whispered to himself, steadying his breath.
"It will all be okay."
The back door let out a faint creak as Marcus unlocked it with a code he remembered all too well. The sound of the door opening echoed through the stillness, sharp and warning like the toll of a bell. He froze, holding his breath, listening intently. Satisfied that no one had noticed, he slipped inside. The long hallway, lined with its once imposing crimson carpet, stretched out before him. Now, it exuded an oppressive weight rather than majesty. The dim yellow light of the wall sconces cast weak illumination, making the shadows even more menacing. Marcus crouched low, moving swiftly but silently, each step syncing with the pounding rhythm of his heartbeat. A flashlight beam swept over the walls, grazing the gaps between the statues. Marcus ducked behind a massive marble sculpture, pressing himself against its cool surface. The guard's footsteps drew closer, each one a hammer strike of tension. When the light shifted away, he darted toward the staircase leading to Richard Prescott's office. Standing before the heavy wooden door of his father's office, Marcus took a deep, steadying breath. The electronic lock blinked with a faint green light. His sweaty palm hovered as he entered the code. The door clicked softly open, revealing the vast room adorned with family portraits and a gleaming mahogany desk. Marcus's gaze locked onto the filing cabinet behind the desk, the vault of secrets that could overturn the entire case. Moving quickly, he approached the cabinet, his hands trembling as they hovered over the lock. After a brief moment of hesitation, he entered the code. The cabinet opened with a mechanical click. Inside lay a black leather-bound folder. As Marcus picked it up, its weight seemed to carry the collective burden of Nia, his children, and his own fractured conscience. He flipped through the first few pages, the desk lamp casting light over rows of figures and signatures, evidence of shady dealings and concealed expenditures that Prescott Enterprises had desperately tried to bury. Clutching the folder tightly, Marcus exhaled, his breathing heavy, but his expression resolute. In that instant, he no longer felt like a traitor to his family, but a defender of another, the family he truly belonged to.
"Family isn't what I leave behind,"
Marcus murmured to himself, clutching the folder to his chest.
"It's what I choose to protect."
He slipped out of the office, his footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. Casting one last glance behind him, Marcus didn't hesitate. This wasn't just a rebellion against an empire, it was a redemption for his past mistakes and a fight for those he cherished most. The door closed behind him with finality, marking the end of a chapter weighed down by the crushing expectations of his legacy. But it also heralded the beginning of a new one, where his resolve burned brighter than ever. With the documents securely in hand, he disappeared into the night, driven by urgency and unwavering determination. Just hours later, in the courtroom, Nia stood tall before the jury, her hand resting firmly on the stack of files Marcus had risked everything to retrieve. Her eyes glimmered, not just with the power of truth, but with the hope that justice would finally prevail. Taking a deep breath, she began the most pivotal fight of her life. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension accumulated through relentless arguments. Nia stood at the podium, her eyes blazing under the bright lights, unwavering and fearless. In front of her, the documents Marcus had risked everything to retrieve lay neatly stacked, each page a sharp weapon poised to pierce through the veil of lies woven by Prescott Enterprises.
Your Honor,
Nia began, her voice firm, each word ringing clear in the silence.
today I present evidence of systemic abuse of power and financial manipulation by Prescott Enterprises. This is not merely a personal vendetta against me and my company, but an affront to the very justice we all strive to uphold.
She lifted one of the files, her fingers brushing over the bold numbers and printed text.
These documents, sourced directly from Prescott Enterprises' own systems, expose hidden expenditures concealed within satellite projects. These contracts,
she continued, her voice growing steadier,
reveal deliberate attempts to sabotage the reputation of Carter Creations to protect their own interests.
A lawyer from Prescott Enterprises rose to object, but their voice was drowned out by the stark clarity of the evidence. The jury murmured amongst themselves, their dissatisfaction beginning to show in their expressions. Nia pressed on, locking eyes with the opposing counsel, her gaze cutting through their facade like a blade.
Prescott Enterprises may believe they are too big to fail, but I am here to prove otherwise. Today, I speak not only for myself, but for everyone who has ever been trampled by their greed.
Across the room, Prescott Enterprises attorneys scrambled through their notes, unable to find a counter-argument. Richard Prescott, seated in the back, looked pale. Though he tried to maintain a calm demeanor, his eyes betrayed his frustration and helplessness. The judge struck the gavel 3 times, the sound slicing through the courtroom's collective breath.
After reviewing the evidence and hearing testimony from both sides,
she declared in a measured tone laced with authority,
this court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Nia Carter.
For a moment, the room erupted with whispers and gasps. But at the center of it all, Nia remained still, her hands resting gently on the podium. She closed her eyes and drew a deep breath. It wasn't exhilaration that filled her, but a profound sense of relief, as if the weight she had carried for years had finally been lifted. She turned to glance at Marcus, seated not far away. He gave her a slight nod, his eyes brimming with pride and respect. But Nia didn't linger on him. Her gaze moved to the back row, where 3 young faces watched her with awe and joy. Chloe held their hands tightly as Aiden, Lila, and Sienna rose to their feet, their innocent eyes sparkling with happiness. Nia stepped out of the courtroom and into the long hallway. She lifted her head, the sunlight streaming through the tall windows casting a warm glow on her face.
I did it,
she whispered, a quiet promise to herself and her children. A deep sense of pride welled within her, not just for the victory, but for proving that justice, though elusive, could be achieved with resilience and belief. Marcus stood at the far end of the hall, quietly observing Nia in the sunlight spilling through the grand courthouse windows. She stood tall, her head held high, her face radiant with relief and triumph. The light seemed to wrap around her, making everything else fade into insignificance. He had never seen her stronger than she was in this moment. In every confident step she took, in the way she embraced her children as they rushed to her side in celebration, Marcus felt a power unlike anything he had ever encountered. This wasn't just the victory of a lawsuit, it was the triumph of a woman who had faced injustice, borne the scars of her battles, and emerged unbroken. Marcus clenched his fist slightly, his chest swelling with an indescribable emotion. It was a deep respect for the woman he had once hurt, admiration for the mother who had fought tirelessly for her children, and a belief that she embodied the impossible made real.
She's not just strong,
Marcus thought, unable to take his eyes off Nia.
She's the strongest person I've ever known.
He stepped back, careful not to intrude on the sacred moment between Nia and her children. In his heart, he knew she didn't need validation from him or anyone else. But he couldn't help but feel proud of her, and proud of the choice he had made to stand with her in this fight.
You know,
Chloe's voice broke through his thoughts, and Marcus turned to find her smiling warmly at him. Her eyes sparkled with quiet approval.
you picked the right side, Marcus. Nia didn't need saving. But today you became part of her victory.
Marcus didn't reply. He offered her a small, bittersweet smile, one that reflected both joy and reverence. Deep down, he understood Nia wasn't merely a chapter in his life, she was the best thing he had ever witnessed. In the fading light of the afternoon, Marcus quietly left the courthouse hallway, though the image of Nia and their 3 children remained vivid in his mind. His steps slowed as he passed the front courtyard, where Aiden, Lila, and Sienna were playing near their mother. The children's laughter rang out, pure and unrestrained, blending with the gentle way Nia bent down to embrace them. From a distance, Marcus watched their small gestures, the carefree spins of childhood, the protective way Nia held them close. A yearning stirred deep within him, not for power or success as it once had been, but for the chance to be a father, to become part of their world. He inhaled deeply, summoning the courage to move closer, knowing that this time his efforts couldn't be for himself, but for the 3 young souls who needed him most.
It's time,
Marcus thought, his gaze softening as it rested on his children.
Time to take a step forward, not just to make amends, but to build something real and meaningful.
Slowly, Marcus walked toward Nia and the children playing beneath the shade of a large tree. His hands clenched at his sides, his palms damp with sweat. He had never felt so uncertain, not in the countless high-stakes meetings or the colossal challenges he'd faced at Prescott Enterprises. But this was different. This wasn't just a mission, it was a second chance to be a father.
Aiden, Lila, Sienna?
Marcus called out, his deep voice carrying a slight tremor. The children stopped, turning toward him. Each of their expressions was distinct curiosity, doubt, and a touch of surprise.
I know,
Marcus began, drawing a steady breath.
I wasn't here when you needed me, but I want to make things right if you'll give me the chance.
Aiden crossed his arms over his chest, his sharp gaze fixed on Marcus, silent but radiating disapproval. Lila, on the other hand, lit up like a ray of sunshine, running toward Marcus with wide, shining eyes. Sienna stayed where she was, her head tilted slightly, scrutinizing his every word and movement with an intensity far beyond her years. It was Aiden who broke the silence first, his tone cold and direct.
Why are you here now when Mom cried? When kids teased us at school, where were you?
Marcus lowered his head, Aiden's words cutting deep.
I'm sorry, Aiden,
he said, his voice heavy with regret.
I have no excuse. I was wrong. All I can do now is ask for your forgiveness.
Before Aiden could respond, Lila interjected, grabbing Marcus's hand with a bright, innocent smile.
Will you play with me, Daddy? I want you to draw with me. Mom says you draw beautifully.
Lila's words softened the tension in the air. Marcus offered a small smile, nodding.
I'll draw anything you want, Lila.
Sienna, who had remained silent, finally took a step forward. Her voice was soft but carried a surprising gravity.
I'll believe you, but you have to promise not to make Mommy sad anymore. She's been through enough.
Her words stopped Marcus in his tracks. The look in her eyes, so much like Nia's. pierced him, as though she were testing the sincerity behind his promises. Marcus felt the weight of the moment press down on him. Each of his children represented something different. Aiden's words carried the sting of reproach, Lila's warmth was a glimmer of hope, and Sienna's quiet demand was a reminder of his responsibility. He realized just how much he had missed years he could never reclaim.
I know I can't fix everything with an apology,
Marcus said, his voice hoarse. He knelt down, meeting his children at eye level.
but I promise I'll never make your mom sad again, and I promise to always be here for you. I'm not going anywhere this time.
He extended his hands toward them, waiting. Lila didn't hesitate, flinging herself into his arms and squeezing him tightly, as though afraid he might disappear. Sienna smiled faintly and nodded her approval. Even Aiden, though his gaze remained cautious, took a step closer. In that moment, Marcus felt a weight lift from his heart. This wasn't just a promise, it was the beginning of a long journey to earn the trust of the people who mattered most. The cozy home was bathed in the warm glow of golden lights. On the table, flickering candles cast a soft, gentle radiance, their light dancing off sparkling crystal glasses. Aiden, Lila, and Sienna darted around the room, their joyous laughter mingling with the animated chatter of Chloe and Nia's closest friends. The atmosphere was rich with warmth, a sanctuary that seemed to cradle every heart within it. Marcus stood in the corner, his gaze fixed on Nia. She stood by the table, her radiant smile lighting up her face as she listened to Lila excitedly recount the story of her latest drawing. In her simple yet elegant dress, Nia exuded a natural beauty and quiet strength and aura of a woman who had weathered countless storms and emerged even more resilient. Taking a deep breath, Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He gripped it tightly, the weight of the moment pressing on him, before stepping toward Nia. His footsteps, though steady, were swallowed by the lively sounds around him, but when he stopped in front of her, the entire room seemed to slow.
Nia?
Marcus began, his voice low but clear, his eyes filled with profound sincerity. The room fell silent, every gaze turning toward them. Nia looked at Marcus, her brows knitting slightly in curiosity, as if to ask what he was doing. Marcus dropped to one knee, opening the velvet box to reveal a ring, its modest stone gleaming in the candlelight. He looked up at her, his eyes brimming with love and contrition.
Nia?
He started again, his voice trembling slightly but resolute.
You've taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about love and sacrifice. I once walked away from the most important thing in my life, but you've given me a chance to make things right.
He drew in a steadying breath, his words carrying the weight of a heartfelt plea.
I don't want to lose this family again. I don't want to lose you or the kids. Nia, will you give me the chance to build a life with you? A life where I dedicate everything I am to protecting and loving you.
Nia stood frozen, her eyes wide, the candlelight reflecting in her tear-filled gaze like tiny stars. She looked at Marcus, seeing in him not just a man seeking forgiveness, but one who had worked tirelessly to earn her trust. For a fleeting moment, she thought of the past, the wounds, the times she had stood alone. But then she remembered the journey they had walked together, the steps he had taken to become the man standing before her now.
Marcus?
Nia finally said, her voice soft but steady.
You've already had your second chance. And this time, don't make me regret it.
A gentle smile spread across her face, carrying with it a mix of trust and hope. She extended her hand, allowing Marcus to slide the ring onto her finger. The room erupted in cheers and laughter. Lila jumped up and down, racing over to hug them both.
Daddy and Mommy are getting married, right? Daddy, you're staying forever, aren't you?
Sienna smiled faintly, a knowing look on her face, as though she had predicted this all along. Aiden, though hesitant at first, couldn't hide the small, genuine smile that tugged at his lips as he saw the happiness radiating from his mother. In that moment, as Marcus and Nia gazed into each other's eyes, they both understood that this was more than just a proposal. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a true family bound together by love, forgiveness, and an unwavering belief in the future. On a soft green lawn beneath a night sky glittering with stars, Nia, Marcus, and their 3 children gathered around a small table. On the table, vibrant paper lanterns were arranged alongside pens and candles. Aiden held a pen, his face serious as he carefully wrote his wish on a red lantern.
"What are you writing, Aiden?"
Marcus asked, crouching down beside him. Aiden hesitated for a moment, but then held up the lantern for Marcus to read.
"I wish for Mom to always be happy and for our family to never be apart again."
Marcus looked at him, his eyes gentle but deeply moved.
"That's a beautiful wish,"
he said, placing a hand lightly on Aiden's shoulder. Lila bounced over, waving her pen excitedly as she showed off her bright yellow lantern.
"Daddy, I wish that you'll always stay here to play with me, draw with me, and tell me bedtime stories."
Marcus chuckled, ruffling her hair affectionately.
"I'll do my best, my little princess."
Sienna, with her quiet maturity beyond her years, sat beside Nia, carefully writing small, deliberate words on her blue lantern.
"I just want our family to stay together,"
she said softly.
"And for Mom to never have to worry again."
Nia smiled, wrapping her arm around Sienna's shoulders.
"Thank you, Sienna. That's the biggest wish I have too."
Marcus picked up a small candle, lighting each lantern one by one. The warm glow began to spread, illuminating the lanterns like tiny flames of hope. He handed one to Nia, their eyes meeting in a silent exchange of understanding and gratitude. Together, the family released the lanterns into the night sky. One by one, they floated upward, their lights merging with the vast darkness above, carrying with them the wishes and dreams of every family member. The soft glow from the lanterns bathed each face in a warm, golden light. Nia, standing at the center of her family, smiled radiantly, her eyes glistening with happiness. Marcus bent down to embrace Lila and Aiden, while Sienna held Nia's hand, her gaze fixed on the sky, watching the lanterns soar higher and higher. The camera slowly pulled back, capturing the small family huddled together amidst the endless expanse of the moonlit lawn. Above them, the lanterns shone brightly, blending seamlessly with the distant stars. Their light served as a quiet testament that no matter how painful the past or how challenging the journey, the future remained full of hope and love. One lantern climbed higher than the rest, glowing brilliantly against the darkness, a symbol of the family's reunion and the fresh start ahead for Nia and her loved ones, a family bound by love, forgiveness, and unshakable belief in the promise of tomorrow. In the gentle glow of the lanterns rising high into the night sky, the story of Nia and Marcus came to a close, but its message would echo far beyond its end. This was not merely the tale of a man seeking redemption or a resilient woman rising after every fall. It was a living testament that no matter how many times life knocks us down, love, forgiveness, and hope possess the power to rebuild everything. Marcus learned that family is not about power or prestige, but about love and the willingness to sacrifice for those you hold dear. Nia proved that even in the darkest moments, steadfastness and faith in oneself can guide you through any storm. This story serves as a reminder that sometimes we must let go of the past to move forward, forgive to find peace, and love to discover life's true meaning. The lanterns continued to ascend, carrying with them the light of faith and new beginnings. Beneath the vast, open sky, Nia, Marcus, and their children stood together, hand in hand, ready for a new journey, a journey free of resentment, filled only with love, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. But can this new chapter erase the pain of the past? What challenges await this fragile reunion? Don't miss the next episode to uncover the twists and turns of their journey to rebuild trust, love, and family.